Hello, everybody. My name is Lovey Plaha. I will be going over Chapter 11, Reconciliation and Final Value Opinion in our textbook. It starts on page 343, and we learn about many different key concepts that basically talk about the appraisal review process of determining whether the data that it's being used and compiled in the final report is relevant, reliable, the way that the values are weighted, are defined appropriately and included in the report, how the reconciliation judgment is made, as well as the final value estimate and weight estimates. Those are identified. We learn about what is considered a credible appraisal and the reliability of a value indicator. These are the many key concepts we learn here. So just first off, just a definition for page 343, we learn about the reconciliation. Just defined by the author, it is as part of the orderly process of preparing a reconciliation that the appraiser will review the entire appraisal to make certain that the data used, as well as the analytical techniques and logic followed, are valid, realistic, and consistent. We learned that there are many different ways or approaches to value from the previous chapters. And that is basically in the final appraisal report identified, defined as why it's the most appropriate to use for coming to the conclusion of the final value estimate by the appraiser. The reconciliation process is basically reviewing the whole appraisal and identifying the different ways of coming to that conclusion that the appraiser has done with the data. So the reliability and relevance of the data that's being used is explained by the appraiser in this reconciliation process of the final report. Um, we learned that the level of accuracy, the amount of data that's being used, and the relevance explanation are all used as value indicators. So that is explained further on page 348 for anybody who wants to go back and reference. Then the reconciliation judgment is then made, which we refer to as the final opinion of value on the URAR report, the Uniform Residential Appraisal Report, the 1004. The point estimates and range values are also explained, and the rounding. So or the appraiser will assign weight to certain values that they define. So for example, in the cost comparison approach, it's important that the appraiser goes and identifies the comparable properties that are being used to the subject property to come to the conclusion of the subject property's value by identifying the weight values that are being used and how the conclusion is reached. So this chapter is all about assessing the raw data and making the reasonable judgment of value by looking at the key elements such as reliability and relevance of the data. So with that, the appraiser provide their expert opinions by using that data and weighing the different values, indicating the features of a home and determining the value and explaining that in the report. So reconciliation is basically providing the receipts. It's not a mathematical equation, but it's an evaluative measure that considers the validity of the process that's being used and the data that's being used to come to that final estimate of value. Then the pros and so adding the weight is also identified by the appraiser to make sure that that subject property and the comparable property, anything that is more or less than in the comparable property, it's then made more similar to the subject property by weighing the values of the comparable property to bring it to the same level as the subject property, to explain that that is why the subject property's value is determined in the way that it is for the cost comparison approach, for example, which is the most commonly used one for single family homes. Um, and basically that is my take on chapter 11. Thank you very much.